I'm a caseworker at the London office of AKT. And so, as you probably know, AKT is a housing advice service for 16 to 25-year-olds who identify as LGBTQ and are either facing homelessness or living in a hostile environment. And kind of that means many different things as well. I think homelessness is obviously used as like a blanket term, but people might not understand kind of like what that looks like for a lot of our young people.
And I guess I should introduce myself. I'm Susie Ruffle. I'm a stand-up comedian and writer and podcaster. And I wanted to get involved with AKT because I've long admired the work that they do. And I heard about these sessions, these chats, and I thought that it would be really great to get involved so that I can find out more about them, and also I can find out how I can help. And I can tell you that, and then we can all be more useful. So hello, Ellen. How are you?
Hi, I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I like the sort of the delicately placed.
Oh my god, my contact lens solution.
No, it's good. It gives it a bit of atmosphere. Welcome. So how long have you been working at AKT?
So I've been working at AKT for about 7 months now, so not too long, yeah.
And what sort of first drew you to working with them?
So I was working in homelessness, and that's what I was interested in. And obviously, well, not obviously, but I identify as LGBTQ myself. So I think immediately it's just a bit of a personal issue, and that LGBTQ people, young LGBTQ people, are massively overrepresented in homelessness statistics. And I think that AKT's approach to supporting young LGBTQ identifying people offers like, I think, what can be like a really like sustainable and supportive model for like giving like young people that like not like setting them up for like a longer term stability, that because of like their identities they've experienced abuse or at home, or like unfortunately like insecure housing situations for long periods of times, which I think really like sets young people's kind of like roadmaps off. And I think that like housing solutions is like incredibly supporting to like giving people like stable support, which enables them to just like move on and just like be whoever they are.
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't got somewhere to sort of go to bed every night, it's very hard to get the rest of your life going in the direction that you want it to. So do a lot of people that come to AKT, is it, because my assumption's always been that it would be that they were sort of, they came out and they were kicked out, or they came out and then it became sort of hostile at home so that they needed to sort of seek somewhere else. Is that what happens a lot of the time?
Yeah, that's a really common experience. So our young people come to us, they refer to us. So it will often be that young people are living at home and the like homophobia or like transphobia that they're experiencing from their families has just got too much. And I think them reaching out is often like a first step into like trying to figure out what to do next. And often people really, I just think it's really scary prospect, like suddenly changing your life. And like, even if you've been in that hostile environment, it's still home and what you know. So I think that young people, like, it really helps to have a service that can offer some guidance to that. And then a lot of our young people who get in touch have been sofa surfing, you know, just like crashing at different friends for like a really long time. And I think that that's that like instability we've talked, like that we've just kind of touched on, that young people experience. And then especially like what's going on now, like sofa surfing, well, the government's guidance has said that sofa surfing isn't a option for like public health guidelines. And obviously there's a huge anxiety about crashing with someone and what that means for movement, because I've been working with someone who was moving between like two houses that they'd stay for like a few nights in a row, and before COVID they stayed at many places, and then they've like whittled it down, but that's still makes people you're staying with uncomfortable maybe as well. And I think just really like constant anxiety. And then there's like an added risk of staying with people that you might not know, but you just like need a roof. And then I think that it's often a really big step for people coming forward to ask for help as well.
Yeah, I think being someone that's constantly in that sort of cycle of not having sort of not feel like they've got sort of roots down in where they're living. That must be really hard on mental health, self-esteem, just the uncertainty of it all. Do you find that a lot?
Yeah, absolutely. And then it's just so difficult, because as well, I think with the like anxiety that's been coming with the insecure, often like young people are like on a kind of like overdrive of like adrenaline rush of like figuring stuff out themselves, and then sometimes do then maybe get into something more sort, then it's kind of like the shock comes in of like what's been happening. And I think that it's actually like having like long-term housing insecurity it has really long-term effects for like people's like mental health and like trusting people, feeling safe.
Have you found that, because I've got a couple of questions actually. So on the podcast that I do, I've had quite a lot of correspondence from LGBTQI young people who have got in touch to say that they're not that hostile might be too strong a word, but that they're living at home and they've just come out, or they're thinking about coming out, and there's sort of an extra pressure at the moment because we don't have school or work or meeting up with friends or that time that we relax. Are you finding that people are seeking out your services even more at the moment?
Yeah, we've had an absolutely huge rise. Like as soon as like the lockdown began, these are not figures I could draw off the top of my head, but just in terms of like my own personal workload and the amount of referrals we're seeing every day. We've had an absolute enormous rise in referrals. Because exactly what you've said, where like schools are closed or like you can't see friends anymore. All the coping mechanisms that our young people would have used to like manage themselves, like the environment they live at home, have been completely stripped away, and they're like faced at home with like people who just are making them like feel so uncomfortable about who they are, and like that varies in degrees of like what that looks like. But I think that it's like I think it needs to be nice how like homelessness is like really overrepresented in our client group, and that like for for young people living at home who are in these hostile environments, I think it's just very easy to say, like, I think sometimes it's like said like, oh, like young people who are LGBTQ like experiencing homophobia, and I think it kind of sometimes just saying it it's really hard to express like how that feels like every day for that young person, and like what those like long-term effects are on that person being able to express themselves and like feeling.
100%. Yeah, like I feel like, not that I really experienced any, I'm very lucky that I didn't experience any homophobia in my in my home life as a teenager, but I feel like the homophobia that I sort of witnessed and experienced as a young person, I feel like I carried the shame of that way into I'm 34 now, and I'd say that it's only in the last few years that I've really got rid of all that sort of shame, because it seeps in. I think that's the thing. I think that often the thing that, you know, we want to say to allies, or even, you know, to people that aren't allies, and people that we're trying to, you know, help understand what a life is like when you are slightly on the outside, and you know, and that's often, well, for me, that experience as a lesbian. I think that you know, the little knocks, the sort of the comments around a dinner table, people turning a blind eye when homophobia happens, people using a slur without really thinking about it, those things really do seep in. And I think it's really important for sort of all LGBTQI plus people, you know, to know that it's okay for those things to hurt, and it's okay if you're experiencing, you know, if that's making you experience some anxiety, that's totally fine, and it's totally valid. And your experience, you know, your feelings around that are so valid, and it's so important that you don't try and shrug it off, you know. And I think it must be really hard, especially at the moment when people are sort of trapped is maybe not the right word, but you know, we're stuck in these situations, and maybe, you know, you might have even a homophobic housemate or a family member. I think that it must feel very isolating. And I guess the work that AKT do, people being able to reach out to you and people be able to email you or get in touch with you somehow will hopefully help people sort of sense some community or get the feeling that someone is there for them, even though it's not physical at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think like in our like services and youth engagement team, yeah, we're just doing like everything we can, and like to have again like quite like honest, like difficult conversations, being really honest about how hard things are at the moment. And I think actually trapped might sound extreme, but I actually kind of think it's very reflective to like what our young people are experiencing and feel like. Yeah.
So can I ask you how it all works so if someone gets in touch with you and maybe tell me what it's like sort of in normal times and now while we're sort of like experiencing this sort of worldwide crisis. So if someone gets in touch with you and they're saying, I'm now experiencing homelessness, I don't feel like I can be at my parents', what then happens next?
So in normal times, we'd invite them into the office as soon as possible. We'd call them, invite them into the office as soon as possible for an assessment, and then and then go through like their personal circumstances and see what we could do for them. And so like lockdown and COVID, like for example, if that young person needed to leave that day, we'd have certain resources we draw on so that we could ensure that they had like somewhere to stay that night, which wasn't in the like hostile environment or something. But
now, be a hostel, or would that be a hostel, or would it be with like a volunteer? How does that? Yeah,
like hostels, or there are certain services which we have partnerships with where young people can stay in their homes, like which is like for young people kind of vetted households service that is called Night Stop. If people feel like volunteering for that as well, maybe. Then, but at the moment, it's called Night Stop. Is a service that we use, which for young people who.
And if people wanted to, because. I've got a spare room, and a lot of my friends have got spare rooms, and maybe this is something that we could do more in normal times than now. How does that then work to someone? Because if someone's watching this and going, well, I'd love to be able to offer, my spare room up for someone that's in a crisis. How do they go about doing that? Get in touch with you guys and then get sort of a DBS?
Yeah, so, AKT also has a host program that they're getting up and running at the moment, which would have all the like proper details for that on our website, but it would be to do with like what any host is like able to offer for the young person in terms of like how long term and like what works for the young person and the person who's hosting, just ensuring like a secure, like stable environment.
So if someone's watching and they're thinking, well, I could offer a room in my place for a week here and there, that would be something that would be useful to like, even short term. It's worth that
kind of offer for a young person is like the difference between like sleeping outside. But then what's difficult at the moment is that those resources kind of aren't there for us because of like the lockdown restrictions. So we're like really, really, really relying on councils and their like housing support and like working with them to like ensure that people are like suitably housed at the moment. And that like requires a lot of time and can be really difficult. We get really varied responses. So
if people are watching this now and thinking, well, I'd really love to support AKT, and maybe they haven't heard of them before, and like watching this video has given them a bit of insight into the incredible work that you guys do. How can we help at the moment? What can we do? Is there fundraising? Is there, you tell me.
So there's lots of different ways to become a supporter. We like accept donations in any kind of form, and we accept them monthly. And then we've got a specific COVID fund that we're fundraising for at the moment, which provides relief, I think, just to make those differences between your experience being like in like some kind of like hotel temporary accommodation that you've been like placed in by the council where you like don't have access to Wi-Fi. We'd like support that young person to make sure they've got data so they could be involved in like youth engagement events or just like speak with friends, which is just so important at the moment. And it seems like something like very small, but I think those like small changes really make the difference to like.
100%. I mean, I live in my flat with my partner, but if I couldn't talk to my friends or family members that I'm close to, I'd feel super isolated at the moment. That's even living with someone that I'm in a very happy relationship with. So that makes perfect sense. So and all of that stuff can all be found on AKT's website,
akt.org.uk.
Well, I feel like I've got, I wanted to get involved with this because I do really care about the work you guys do, and I feel like I've now learned a little bit, but also I've sort of worked out how I can help and how I can be useful, and hopefully some people watching this video will, if they have the funds to be generous at the moment, maybe AKT would be a good place for that money to go.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your interest.
Pleasure, absolute pleasure.